Right, so a full-on socialist and a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, the same group that went into the restaurant and harassed Secretary Nielsen while she was eating dinner the other day, just took down a 10-term establishment Democrat in the New York's 14th district. Her name is Alexandria Cortez. She's 28 years old. She's essentially a 28-year-old activist. This is what she is and what she has been. And she ousted 10-term incumbent Rep. Joe Crowley in New York's 14th congressional district. Now, she's run her entire campaign on things like free health care for everyone in the country,
improved and expanded Medicare for all,
free college tuition for everyone in the country,
tuition-free public college and trade school,
and a federal jobs guarantee.
A federal jobs guarantee.
These are some of the things that Bernie Sanders ran on, and she's also been seen at many different protests calling for the abolition of ICE and open borders in this country.
We have no right to stand for injustice. There is no reason for this. And we are complicit. These are human rights abuses. These are human rights abuses. I cannot sleep at night knowing these children are here. Free the children! 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 Free the children!
Now, in a lot of her speeches, her debates, her writings, her articles, her tweets, she's mentioned Bernie Sanders on more than one occasion, several different times. She has high praises for Bernie Sanders, the same Bernie Sanders who made $1 million last year, the same Bernie Sanders who has several different houses that he owns, the same Bernie Sanders whose wife was investigated for fraud just recently. Now, these are the types of people who are going to get into office. So if you think that left socialism can never come to America, if you think that communism can never come to America, just take a trip down to your local academic institution and see what they're talking about in classrooms there. Just take a walk down to the local mall to go talk with millennials. Just look online for just a couple of seconds and you will see that there is a very dangerous uprising in left socialism and borderline communism. Of course, that's what it always ends up to be. Now, when you talk to some of these millennials who are so out of touch with reality, just as Alexandria Cortez is, who's probably never even paid real taxes or had to support a family, they'll tell you that they envision this future utopia of everything's free, college is free.
I'm not going to stop until we have tuition-free public institutions for everyone.
Healthcare is free, federal jobs for everyone, everything's free, and we're also going to have open borders at the same time. We're going to abolish ICE, and no human is illegal. These are the types of things that they talk about. These are the types of things that she ran her campaign on, completely abolishing ICE. And they don't understand that if you look at the population outlook, let's just go off of just easy numbers for some of these people who don't have too high of intelligence like this Alexandria Cortez. Just the population outlook come 2050. 2050, okay? Just a few short decades from now. 398 million people in this country. There will be 400 million people in this country come 2050. These are modest projections. This is because of immigration and the amount of children that these immigrants that we're bringing in from south of our border only, pretty much, are having. Now let's look at from 2060. We're looking at about 416 million people here in this country. 2070, 2080, probably 450 million people. 2090, so we're looking at the future of our children and the future of their children, probably around 500 million people here, and at that time, you can forget about ever seeing a white person around America. This is exactly what they're running on, to completely replace whites with a different population that votes for their policies.
It's a kind of utopia, just the fact that the whole world will mix up with each other, that in, I don't know, 70, 80 years, there will be no white people anymore and only cappuccino-colored people.
But that's the only way. This is the only solution. This is my way of thinking.
Mix up,
it's our only hope.
So turning basically us into the countries that they're coming from, along with their politics, such as Venezuela, things of that nature. This is what they're running on. And I asked them, What do you think, with the amount of immigration that we're having coming in, with the type of immigrant that is coming in, who is 70% on welfare, over 70%, according to all polls, who more than half don't even graduate high school, who more than half don't contribute to society, who more than 70% just live off of the government the entire time? What do you think is going to happen when we hit 400 million people? Do you think that we're still going to be able to afford free healthcare for all? We can't afford it now, best projections say. Do you think that we're going to be able to afford free tuition, college tuition for all? Do you think that we're going to be able to afford programs like federal jobs guarantee?
A federal jobs guarantee.
What about when we hit 500 million? Will we still be able to afford it? What do you think that your taxes are going to look like? Do you think that they're going to be under 70% tax? You're going to be over 75% tax at that point in time if these actual policies that people like Alexandria-Cortez run on actually come to fruition. I mean, even the CNN panel talked down to Bernie Sanders and his plan, saying that America can't afford it.
Senator Sanders, you have at various times, including just now, expressed the belief that the United States should look to Denmark and the Scandinavian countries for inspiration of the vision.
Yes.
Where the country is going, as you said. As was alluded to, I was born and grew up in Denmark. And these are countries where the government spends taxes and spends approximately twice the level of the United States. Mm-hmm. And while I am very sympathetic to many of your spending proposals, especially on the things you mentioned on early childhood and single payer and the like, I also know that these are countries that heavily tax everybody, not just the rich people, middle classes. They have consumption taxes on everything of 20%.
Nothing is for free. But I believe in a kind of society which is different than Ted's does. I want to see all of our people, the young people, the old, the poor, the working class, be able to get the education they need, the health care they need, the job training they need. Does it cost money to do that? It does.
Senator Sanders, I just want to ask a follow-up, because just to be clear, Danish citizens pay the highest tax rate of all developed nations as a percentage of GDP. The United States on that list ranks 32nd.
That's right.
Denmark #1. Do you think Americans are ready for a big tax hike like that?
I mean, if we can have sensible discussions like this, yeah, I think they will be. I think they will be.
I mean, these socialists, including the Democratic Socialist of America, who constantly call for the abolition of ICE, who constantly call for complete and utter open borders into this country, for a constant, unrelenting flow of immigration into America, these socialists that praise Bernie Sanders don't even know what he even said, and I showed this to you in the last couple videos. Bernie Sanders understands this, that open borders makes a country poorer.
It's like sharply raising the level of immigration we permit, even up to a level of open borders, about sharply increasing
open borders.
Foreign aid.
Open borders. That's a Koch brothers proposal. The
really?
idea, of course, I mean, that's a right-wing proposal which says essentially there is no United States.
But it would make a lot of the global poor richer, wouldn't it?
And it would make everybody in America poor. Then you're doing away with the concept of a nation state. And I don't think there's any country in the world which believes in that.
So when you talk about left socialism, you have to talk with these people, these millennials, these young people that haven't paid taxes in their life, such as the case with Alexandria-Cortez, who's, hasn't supported a family, doesn't understand what it really takes, doesn't understand what people are facing with high taxes already in this country and in states like New York where she's running. They don't understand these things, so you have to talk about it in simple terms. The population projections for this country are going to be over 400 million people in our lifetime. In our lifetime, it will be over 400 million people, at least in my lifetime. I don't know how old you guys are watching this video. It will be over 400 million in this country. Do you think that we can afford that when it's 400 million? Maybe we can eke it out now with high taxes over 50%. But what about when the country's 400 million? Are we going to start to have birth rate limits? I mean, what is the future going to look like? You see, when you propose these sorts of policies, you have to think of the worst, absolute worst outcome it can be. Now, in saying this, when you look at things like like National Socialism, for instance, which is a right side, the right side of socialism, where you put nationalism first. Things like that actually seem a little bit more viable. So whenever you, and I've always said this in my videos, if you put nationalism first, if you put borders and language and culture and securing the sovereignty of this country first, then you can have social safety nets. Okay, we're not talking about full-on state socialism where the state controls means of production and then it evolves into communism, or devolves into communism, really. We're not talking about that. We're talking about social safety nets if you have nationalism first. So let's say, for instance, in 1960. In 1960, the population of America was around 180 million, so just somewhere around half the country's population today. For the most part, it was a homogenous society. It was pretty much all one culture because it was about 85% or so white people here in this country. In that sort of an atmosphere, if you had nationalism and secure borders and very, very restrictive and very, very limited immigration that you filtered stringently, in that sort of an atmosphere with that population, you can have a lot of social safety nets. You could probably afford free health care for all. You can probably afford free college tuition for all. You could probably even afford many different social safety nets, way more than we have today. But if you do not put nationalism first, those things are unattainable. It's completely out of reach at this point in time anymore. Unless we're talking about somewhere around over 50% taxation on the American people. At that point, no one's going to vote for you when you actually tell them how much these things are going to cost, especially when you're going even further than Bernie Sanders did. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in November, but this is the reason why I tell you in almost every single video that we must vote in the midterm elections. We are coming up on probably the most important midterm elections that we have ever faced before. The most important midterm elections than we have ever faced before, ever. If you haven't registered to vote, do it online tonight. Register to vote and vote during the midterm elections in November, because it is very, very important that we don't let this seep through the cracks because we're just nonchalantly, oh, I don't care, I just want to play the video game, and I don't really care, I'm black-pilled. We can't let that happen. We absolutely have to show up to the polls in November, because it's people like these far-left progressive activists who are going to start winning elections on their side, and we have to answer with something.